Right now, at this exact moment, more people are displaced by war and violence than at literally any other time in modern history. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that demands our absolute full attention. We are unpacking the global refugee crisis. We're going to look at the sheer, unprecedented scale of this displacement, figure out the systemic failures keeping it going, and really break down what actually happens when war steals a home.
Think about it for a second. A home is not just walls. It's way more than that, right? A home is your memories, your fundamental sense of safety, the language you speak with your neighbors, your dreams for the future. But every single time a conflict erupts, millions of people lose all of that overnight. Just gone. Families are forced to pack up and cross borders with literally nothing but fear, hope, and just this raw instinct to survive. This isn't just some abstract political debate, it is a profound human crisis.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Understanding the refugee crisis. To really get a grip on the macro scale of this whole thing, we need to get our vocabulary straight. A refugee crisis happens when massive numbers of people are forced to run from their homes because of war, occupation, or civil conflict. Now, you'll hear a few different terms thrown around. First, there are refugees. These are folks who actually cross international borders. Then, you've got internally displaced people. They're trapped inside their own country's borders, basically on the run at home. And finally, asylum seekers, who are waiting for legal protection in another nation. But here is the absolute most important takeaway. Nobody, and I mean nobody, chooses to leave their home willingly. They are fleeing because staying means death, starvation, or torture.
So what exactly forces that impossible choice? Let's move to Section 2, why people must flee.
What does this actually look like on the ground? When we zoom in, we see how conflict literally dismantles the basic structure of everyday life. Homes are bombed into rubble, schools are shut down, completely robbing kids of an education. Hospitals collapse, jobs just evaporate, and grabbing something as basic as food becomes incredibly expensive or just downright impossible. And on top of all that, armed groups are spreading absolute terror through the streets. People do not flee because they want a cozier life somewhere else. They flee because staying alive becomes physically impossible. Parents lose their dignity, and whole generations of kids are left to grow up in total uncertainty.
This brings us to Section 3, the true human cost.
You know, it is so easy to get numb to the millions and the big statistics on the news, but we really have to look at the human toll here. Contrast your normal, stable, everyday life with the brutal reality of displacement. Just imagine walking hundreds of miles with your kids, or being stuck in an overcrowded temporary camp for years. You're constantly dodging hunger, disease, and frankly, being treated as unwanted everywhere you go. These folks face severe, overlapping nightmares, human trafficking, exploitation, forced child labor, massive mental trauma, and statelessness. And for women and children, those risks are exponentially worse. Yet, despite going through the unimaginable, millions still wake up every day and courageously try to rebuild.
Now, let's look at the ripple effect. Section 4, impact on host countries. If we zoom back out to the macro level, we hit another huge piece of this puzzle: the incredible pressure placed on the countries that take people in. Sudden, massive migration completely overwhelms a host country's core infrastructure. We're talking immediate, massive strain on housing, healthcare, the job market, schools, and public resources. And here is the kicker. It's usually the poorer, neighboring countries that end up carrying the heaviest burden, even though their own resources are already stretched thin. This is exactly why a refugee crisis can never, ever be brushed off as just a local problem. It is a shared, global humanitarian responsibility.
Which leads us to a really tough question. Section 5, why the world fails.
If this is a global responsibility, why is the world so bad at handling it? Well, too often, global powers treat human suffering like a move on a geopolitical chessboard, rather than a humanitarian emergency. The roadblocks to peace are just deeply, stubbornly entrenched. We're talking political interests, the insanely lucrative global arms trade, power struggles, and selective outrage. These systemic failures keep the conflicts burning. And who pays the price? Ordinary civilians. While these debates drag on in comfortable, safe rooms, wars become just another normalized headline, and real human pain slowly turns invisible to the rest of the world.
But hey, it doesn't have to be this way. Let's move to Section 6, solutions for a shared future.
Let's look at how this builds into a real, actionable roadmap. We've got a 5-point path to a solution here. Step 1 is absolutely the most critical: prevent conflicts before they explode. Governments and international organizations have to step up their diplomacy, resolve disputes early, shut down hate propaganda, and actively build peace.
Because let's be real, preventing a war through talking is always, always cheaper, in every sense of the word, than actually fighting one. Moving to step 2, we need incredibly strong international humanitarian support. A camp needs more than just tents. It fundamentally requires consistent food, clean water, actual medical care, education, and serious mental health support. We simply cannot let people who survive the horrors of war die from neglect once they escape. International aid has to be faster, it has to be completely transparent, and it has to be reliable.
Third, we absolutely have to focus on the kids. Every single refugee child deserves to be in a physical school. They need digital education, language support to integrate, and scholarships. Because without that foundation, a child becomes a prime target for poverty, exploitation, and extremism. But if you give them an education, that learning can actually rebuild a future that a bomb tried to destroy.
Wrapping up our solutions, we land on global cooperation and legal protection. Look, refugees shouldn't be treated like criminals. Countries have got to protect asylum rights and ensure basic human dignity. And that takes real shared responsibility, fair resettlement programs, proper international funding, actual peace negotiations, and holding people truly accountable for war crimes. The bottom line, your human rights shouldn't depend on what passport you hold. Human suffering has to unite humanity, not build walls between us.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want this to sink in. Behind every single staggering statistic we've talked about, there is a person who once had a completely normal life. It is so easy to forget that when we're just staring at charts and maps. But these are real people. People who love family dinners, who had a favorite street they walked down, who had a totally predictable Tuesday planned, just like you and me. War can turn physical buildings to dust in a matter of minutes, but rebuilding those shattered human lives, that takes generations.
Which brings us to a massive, provocative question. You know, the real debate isn't actually about whether refugees, quote-unquote, deserve our compassion. The real question we need to be asking is whether humanity itself can even survive without it. It's literally an existential test for all of us.